Please join me in welcoming Dave Sutherland. He'll be discussing his experience battling squamous cell carcinoma since 2007. Dave worked in human resources as well as EMS and fire services until his medical retirement in 2018. And he's also the father of 4. So thank you so much for joining us, Dave.
You're welcome.
Ready.
Yeah, I guess you could say I'm kind of the prototypical skin cancer patient. I'm a redhead, had lots of freckles, mostly when I was younger. You can't really see them too much now. So I'm one of those type 1 skin people. Had a lot of sunburns, blistering sunburns as a child because I was growing up in the 70s. We didn't really know much about sunscreen or that kind of thing. And also my work as a firefighter. Firefighters are at a higher risk for many different kinds of cancer. So that probably contributed a little bit. Like Abby said, my whole story actually started in about 2004. I noticed I had a patch of skin on my right shoulder that was kind of red and scaly. Didn't really bother me much, but I mentioned it to my family doctor at a checkup. And he looked at it and said, wow, it looks like it's eczema or eczema. I'm not sure how you pronounce that. He said, if it bothers you, put some lotion on it. And that was about it. So I kind of did that for about 2 years. Right at the end of 2006, beginning of 2007, that patch of scaly skin actually grew a bump that started to bleed. So I went, my wife, actually she was my fiance at the time, said, Dave, I don't like that. You better go to the doctor and get that checked. So I did. And he looked at it and said, well, I don't know what it is. It's, I don't like it, but you're pretty young. I was 36 at the time. He said, you're too young for it to be skin cancer, but we'll shave it off and we'll biopsy it anyway. So I did get the phone call a couple of weeks later that it was squamous cell carcinoma. And he said, well, you'll need further surgery to make sure they get all of the growth there. And I'd heard about skin cancer. I wasn't too worried about it. And I went in for my surgery at the outpatient department at our local hospital. And they did I guess you could call it a wide excision. And one of the doctors earlier mentioned, the iceberg effect. And my tumor definitely had an iceberg effect. It was about the size of a pea, the bump on top of my skin. But it was probably 2 or 3 centimeters wide and about 3 centimeters deep, almost like an inverted or like a piece of pie. The pathology came back and it was invasive into the lymphatic system, the lymphatic vessels in the area. I actually can remember the actual diagnosis perfectly. It was moderately differentiated squamous cell carcinoma with basaloid features and extensive lymphatic invasion. So I got those results at my doctor's office. I took, the morning off from work. I went back to work and I Googled what that meant, extensive lymphatic invasion, which caused me to panic a little bit. They referred me, the surgeon referred me to the Cross Cancer Institute here in Alberta for radiation therapy, as the margin that he got on the surgery was only about 1 millimeter. So they felt that was too small of a margin, so they figured they would do some radiation. So I had 15 days of radiation treatments in 2007. And they measure radiation treatments in something called grays. I'm not exactly sure what it is, but I had 45 grays of radiation in those 15 days. And then was basically told I could go home and continue living my life, which was fantastic. I felt it had been dealt with, and that was it. it was fine until about 2 years later. My wife, she grabbed me by the arm, my right arm, she was trying to move me somewhere or do something, and she felt a lump in my arm. And she goes, "Well, what's this lump?" I'm like, "I don't know. I hadn't felt anything. I had no discomfort or anything like that." She told me, "Well, I don't like it, so you better get it checked." So I did, went back to my family doctor, and he felt around on my arm, and it was at the top and back of my arm, so kind of the opposite side of the bicep. He said, "Yeah, no, there's something there, and I don't like it either. So whatever it is, it should come out." So he referred me to a plastic surgeon in our local hospital. Went to see the plastic surgeon, and he felt it and didn't like it either. He suggested they do a CAT scan, and the CAT scan came back, the results that they found some enlarged lymph nodes under my right arm, in my right armpit, or axilla, I guess is what they call it. They did ultrasound guided needle biopsy on those large lymph nodes. And the pathology came back that it was now poorly differentiated squamous cell carcinoma. And they actually called it a basaloid squamous cell carcinoma at the time. And that I would need, again, a referral to the cancer clinic here in Alberta, which I got. They did some more tests, CAT scans. I had to actually ask for a PET scan. Showed no other evidence of disease except the in my armpit. So they removed all the lymph nodes from under my right arm. And from the top, they removed a mass from the top of my right arm, which they figured had been a lymph node at one point, but it just was completely destroyed. Post-surgery, I had 6 weeks of chemotherapy. I was on a single agent. It was cisplatin. So I did 6 weeks of cisplatin chemotherapy, as well as another 30 days of radiation treatment. This time they gave me 54 grays of radiation over 30 days to my right armpit and the right upper half of my chest. This time I was followed very closely, regular. For the first couple of years, it was every 3 or 6 months that I was having CAT scans done and appointments at the cancer clinic to follow up. I did those follow-ups for 5 years. And at the end of the 5 years, so I think it was 2014, after 5 years of follow-up and no other evidence of disease, they pronounced me cured. I was discharged from the cancer clinic and again told to go on and live my life, which I did. Which brings us to the late spring or early summer of 2017. And visual disturbances, very strange visual disturbances, where I'd get flashing lights, just like flashing in my vision on the left side. And it would last for 45 seconds or a minute, and then it would stop, and then it would come back. And these kept happening, and along with headaches. I mentioned it to my doctor, and he felt that it was probably a type of migraine. And he suggested I see my eye doctor just to check on my eyes to see if my work, working with computers. I was working with human resources at the time, looking at a computer a lot. He figured that was maybe contributing to eye strain and headaches, etc. The eye doctor found nothing out of the ordinary at that point. So I just continued on, and that would have been in something like June of 2017. In November of 2017, I was at my family doctor for my annual physical, which I mentioned to my doctor at the time, I'm still having these headaches, still having these vision disturbances. I now had, in addition to the flashing light, almost like a kaleidoscope visual disturbance in my vision. And he said, well, I think you maybe should go to an ophthalmologist. So I was referred to an ophthalmologist who did some more, I guess, advanced visual tests. And during those tests, it was determined that I had total blindness in the upper left visual field. So your visual field's divided into, like if you picture a piece of, or a pie, it's delivered into 4 pieces of pie. The upper left, I was not detecting any visual impulses from that area at all. And he said to me, well, it's one of 3 things. He said, you may have had a little stroke. There may be an issue with the nerve from your eyes to your brain, or you may have a tumor. He sent me for an MRI. And on December 13th, 2017, I got the results that the MRI had found a large tumor in my brain. It was about the size of a lime. That was basically right in my right occipital lobe of my brain, which is the part of the brain which processes the visual input from the left side of your vision. Makes sense considering my lack of vision on the left side. So I was referred to a neurosurgeon. They did a couple more MRIs, and the consensus was, after the MRIs, it was that the neurosurgeon's opinion and the opinion of the radiologist that had done the interpretation of the MRIs was it was probably glioblastoma brain tumor, which is a very extremely aggressive primary brain tumor. They did a brain surgery. My first craniotomy was in January of 2018. The pathology came back from that, and safe to say, I think most of the doctors were flabbergasted. I was stunned because it came back as metastatic basaloid squamous cell carcinoma. They did a full body CAT scan, PET scan to determine where the primary was. As this tumor didn't originate in my brain, it came from somewhere else. And they could not find any other source of the cancer. So basically, they attributed it to my previous cancer, that potentially a cell or cells had made it into my brain and avoided discovery on the scans up until a point, at some point, they started to grow. So I did have a brain surgery. They did get all the tumor that they could see. Follow-up scans every 3 months, MRIs of the brain showed some suspicious, there was some worrisome things on there. So they had to do another brain surgery, and found that after my first brain surgery, I had what they called stereotactic radio surgery, basically radiation treatment to the area of the brain that the tumor had been in. The second surgery basically discovered that the radiation treatment itself had caused some damage to the brain, but there was no further tumor growth at that time. So I've been going for regular MRIs since, unfortunately, developed an allergy to the gadolinium contrast they use for MRIs of the brain. So they can't give that to me anymore. They don't get very good pictures of my brain anymore. There are a couple spots that they are concerned about. One in my right temporal lobe of my brain, and the other one in the left frontal lobe. But because they cannot give me Contrast, they don't know what it is. So basically, they consider me stable at this time. Stage 4 squamous cell carcinoma. But I just want to say that the Melanoma Canada network that they've got is amazing. I wish I'd have heard about it when I was first diagnosed, because it would have given me a lot of resources rather than what I did, which was Googling on my own. I think that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dave. Thank you for being here and for sharing your story.